Hello everyone, welcome to the Broken Not Broke interview. I'm Adrian Franco, your host and a cancer dad since 2022. Thank you for joining us today. I want to begin by explaining the purpose of the Broken Not Broke interview. This podcast exists for one reason: to give parents and caregivers of children with cancer a quick resource that will help you to get information about how to access financial support from organizations and other resources. In about 20 minutes, we're going to talk about organizations that support families, about tools, we're going to give some practical tips, book recommendations, and other resources and tools for you, your family in this moment. We know that childhood cancer is going to break your heart, but we don't want you to end financially broke. That's the purpose of the Broken Not Broke interview. Just clear information, no ads, no sponsors, nothing to buy, just access to resources that you need at this moment. We're going to have one episode every month, and you can find all the episodes in our YouTube channel. I would like to tell you about brokenNotbroke.org. This is an online portal where you can have access to information about more than 450 organizations in the 50 states and Puerto Rico that support families affected by childhood cancer. The way to do it is very simple. You just have to select your state, the type of cancer, and what type of support you have. And with that, you will filter a lot of organizations that can be there to support you. With a simple click, you can find their website and even sometimes the forms that they need to apply for the resource. Now, we designed this to be very flexible. What I mean is we want you to have a lot of options to look into. First of all, you're not alone. All these organizations can help. Second, if one organization cannot help for some reason, they usually will tell you where to find what you need. So if it's about transportation, or you need to pay for parking, or utility bills, you need housing, you need different type of support, there's an organization for you, and you can find it in brokenNotbroke.org. Moreover, if you cannot find the information right away, you can contact us. Just find the tab that says contact, and both in English and Spanish, someone will find you and tell you what exactly the database says about information on resources for you and your family. Next is our interview. Interview is at the core of the Broken Not Broke interview podcast. We're going to talk to leaders of nonprofits supporting families affected by childhood cancer. Today, we have a great interview with Christine Lobley. She's the executive director of Fred's Footsteps, an organization in the greater Philadelphia region. They support with very different programs families who have children that are seriously ill, with medical complex situations, may have cancer or special needs. You'll hear from her in a moment. Fred's Footsteps from Philadelphia. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Broken Not Broke interview. Today we welcome Christine Lobley, the executive director of Fred's Footsteps, a leading nonprofit providing financial support to families caring for seriously ill, injured, or disabled children. Christine, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Could you please tell us about the story of Fred's Footsteps and its mission?
Yes, absolutely. So Fred's Footsteps was founded 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. And we were founded, Fred was actually my dad, and he was a local businessman here in Philadelphia where we're located. And when he passed away at 53 of kidney cancer, we started hearing lots of stories about how he, quietly helped people in their time of need. He was in the healthcare industry and just really passionate about children, about the city of Philadelphia, about how keeping families together. So we heard all these wonderful stories and just knew we had to do something to keep that legacy alive. So we founded Fred's Footsteps in his memory. And our vision is that a child's care should be a parent's only worry. So we do that by providing financial support to families caring for seriously ill, injured, and disabled children. We serve 18 counties around Philadelphia, in northern Delaware and South Jersey. And we provide financial support to families so they can stay on their feet through a child's illness.
Well, that's wonderful. And we read that you have helped more than 2,000 families in these 20 years. Could you tell us about, what's a typical family look like?
Yeah, so a typical family, what's kind of interesting about the way that we're set up is when we were first starting and gathering information, we run around to try and see, what's the one thing that all families need and what's the one unifying, issue that everyone's facing. And what we really found was there isn't one, and it's based on circumstances. And if you've met one family with a medically complex child, you've met one family. They're not all the same. Their needs are different, and I'm sure that's the same in the cancer space as well. That families have different needs based on different circumstances. So we really wanted to set up the organization where they tell us what their pressing need is, and then we can respond to that. So I would say the one thing that's really typical for our families is that they are what has been come to known as an ALICE family. So ALICE is an acronym that the United Way of Northern Jersey started, and a project that they started to kind of look at families that the acronym stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained but Employed. So families that are above the federal poverty line, and they're working families, but they're below the line. And depending on the city that they're in or the location that they're in, they're below the line where their basic needs are met. So in the city of Philadelphia, where we are, that's about $80,000 for a family of four. So for a family of four making $80,000, they're just meeting their housing, their utilities, their food costs, with no extra. So they're kind of often a lost element of society where they're getting by, they receive some government support, but they don't qualify for as much assistance. So most of our families, about 80% of our families fit into that. That's not to say that we don't help families who make more or less, but that's kind of our bread and butter of who we support at Fred's Footsteps.
Well, I'm very glad that you're using the metric of Alice because we hear statistics, some official that are used to distribute benefits, and that's a common issue that comes up. Is like regardless of where the poverty line, and this poverty line was designed many decades ago, Alice is a way better metric to capture families who are working, who have income, but nevertheless might need a lot of support in a time of need. So congratulations on the vision of using a metric like United Way's Alice. Can you tell us about the programs that you have at Fred's Footsteps?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Bridge Fund is our main program. That's where we focus the most. That program is meant to be a bridge for families who are facing a financial crisis due to a child's sudden illness, injury, or diagnosis. That program helps with mortgage, rent, utilities, kind of your everyday living expenses to help to support a family while one or both parents may not be working. It may be a single mom who has to take time off from work. And we support those families kind of through that time to get them over the bridge from one side of the crisis to the other. So in that space, we see a lot of NICU babies, a lot of newly diagnosed cancer patients, a lot of accidents, injuries, those types of things. And our other two funds are the PATS Projects and Keys to Mobility. So PATS Projects is our home modification fund. So that provides funding for families to make modifications to their home to improve accessibility for the patient, for the child. So those will be stair glides, ramps, room modifications, bathroom modifications, and it's really with the goal of children being able to stay in their home and caregivers being able to safely care for them within their home. Those are typically where we see families whose child uses a wheelchair and there's accessibility issues, and as the child gets older, it gets harder for them to care for them in their home. And our other program is Keys to Mobility that provides financial assistance for families to obtain accessible vehicle. We work with the families to obtain accessible vans to help them so that they can safely transport their child to their medical appointments, but also so that their child can participate in community activities and be a part of the family and a part of the community, because oftentimes that's just not possible unless they have the transportation to allow that child to have that independence and freedom to be part of what the rest of the family is experiencing.
Well, what an important project you have because we hear all the time also within the cancer families that we serve the fact that these expenses just start piling up during the crisis, and they there might be some friends, there might be some fundraising, but at some point they're gonna need more support. So the fact that you can help them to go through this crisis, especially at the beginning, is essential. Love to hear more about your vision or your observations on childcare. What you have seen in terms of the expense, or what is unique about childcare for the families that you serve.
Yeah, it's really one of the biggest challenges. And there's, kind of multiple aspects to it. There's, that child who is either, maybe in the hospital or at home. And, somebody has to be a caregiver. And especially with the nursing shortage and aid shortage, parents are often, sacrificing their work time to be there for their child. And for children who are medically complex, they can't go to daycare, or maybe they go to school, but there's many appointments and many other times where it makes it hard for a parent to work in this environment where, unfortunately we live in a society where we're expected to work too many hours and don't get enough time off. And, there's kind of not that value placed on that caregiving role. So, children are waiting for medically complex daycares. There's not enough space in those daycares. And oftentimes, and I think particularly in the cancer space, there's also the issue of the immunocompromised, of being immunocompromised, and you can't go to a daycare or can't go to school. And how is that child then cared for at home? And it has to be a parent. In addition to the child, there's also the siblings. And, a lot of times there's expenses there to keep them in, whether it's daycare or after school programs that are just really expensive for most Alice families that we see. So, it's really important to us at Fred's Footsteps to help fill some of those gaps and make sure that we can allow the caregivers to access proper childcare for the siblings and to be available as caregivers for their child.
Well, thank you. And we have seen that in many other families that we have in contact with, in terms of both sides, both the patient, but also the sibling. The fact that you work with both and with the whole family, I think it makes a huge difference for them in this time of need. Without giving us any specific details, but, could you tell us a story of a family that was served by Fred's Footsteps?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just had a really interesting case come to us this past month. And, I think it really highlights kind of what's happening in society around caregiving. It was a patient who, when she was 6 years old, she was diagnosed with ALL, and she had a specific mutation that was really challenging and made it more high risk. And she went into remission at the time and was doing pretty well, and then relapsed this past May and now needs a bone marrow transplant. She lives at home with mom and dad and 6 siblings, so a big family. And, now that she needs a bone marrow transplant, the challenge is around, keeping her safe post-transplant. Her grandmother is local and has been one of her primary caregivers most of her life as well, and helped out a lot. And, they were looking at ways for, how do we make this work so that we can keep her safe? And ultimately, they decided that post-transplant, she was going to live with grandma to be safe. But grandma works, mom works, dad works. Mom and dad both have positions that are really, they're in contact with a lot of people. So that was unsafe for them. They work opposite hours to care for their other children. So, you have a family that's doing everything possible to make ends meet and to stay on top of everything. And there's just not enough hours in the day, and it's really challenging. So she'll be staying with grandma, but grandma has to take time off from work. So, we talk a lot about, a village and having a village, and they do, but it's still not enough when you don't make enough money, and when you're living, in that Alice area. So we're working with that family to help to pay for some of their expenses so that grandma can stay home with this child post-transplant and be able to, ensure her safety and ensure that she's cared for during that time, and that the parents can safely care for their other children. You have to take everything into account, and there's many moving pieces. So that's just one story. And we really pride ourselves on really looking at each situation as its own situation, because, this isn't something that's common, but it's not something that's uncommon either. So families come in all different shapes and sizes. And, we really want to look at where the biggest impact is going to be to make a difference for that family.
Well, a great case to illustrate the work that your organization is doing in terms of looking at a unique situation and finding ways to support the family. Just from what I'm hearing, and we have seen that in the cancer space, the need to isolate someone, to avoid contact, especially in times of winter, you have a lot more
Exactly.
viruses, so it's even more difficult. But finding a way to support this family is what makes a difference. So thanks for sharing that great story and congratulations on supporting them. Let's look at the big picture here, Christine. Where you see the biggest gaps in the system, both policy or institutional, regarding the financial impact for these families.
Yeah, I mean it's such a hard question because unfortunately there's so many of them. But I think what we're seeing right now, in our 20 years of doing this, one of the biggest issues that's come up since COVID is really this nursing shortage and the caregiver shortage. Whether that's, aides, skilled caregivers, nurses, it's really putting a strain on the families that we serve and making it hard for them to be able to go back to work, to be able to, with the call outs and the nursing shortage, a lot of people have their nursing covered, but it's not filled. So they're two different things, right? So insurance may say we'll pay for your nursing or your support while you're working, but then actually finding somebody to do that job is a whole other issue. And this is something that over the past 5 years since COVID, we've just seen a huge increase in the need for it. And what ends up happening is, one or both parents or single parent, single caregiver ends up not being able to work. And then filling in the role of a nurse or aide and not getting paid for it. So I think we have some real gaps in the system around paying parents to be caregivers. Nobody knows your child better than you. And we see a lot of times where they can't fill the nursing position, but they won't pay a parent because they're not a nurse. But then they're having them take care of the child anyway. So it's one of those things, make it make sense. Like they're with the child, but you're saying because they don't have that piece of paper and that degree that you can't pay them as a nurse for the child. So I think that we need to make some real strides in that area and allowing parents to be paid caregivers for medically complex children. I also think, some states are better than others, but we need to do better with FMLA and leave and paid leave for families, not just for your own illness, but to care for a child or somebody else who's medically complex. This problem is only going to get worse as we have an aging population. It's not gonna get better. And the sandwich generation of people who are caring for aging parents and for children. There's a statistic that about 70% of US workforce are also caregivers in some capacity. That's a huge number, and there's a huge strain. And a lot of them, about 60% say that they've received insufficient training, and about 67% of those say that they struggle to balance their job and their caregiving duties. This is a real problem. It's a real problem for the workforce in this country, and it's a real problem for taking care of our elderly and also our children and making sure that they have what they need. We really need to have some things in place to make sure that we're supporting caregivers in this country.
Well, what a great point. I think your observations based on 20 years of experience at Fred's Footsteps, can really inform, what you're seeing today. Anything else you want to share with us about Fred Footsteps, about your programs, your organization, your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. We are, looking forward to the next 20 years and really looking to support more and more families in the Philadelphia region. We can't do that without our supporters and our partners, making sure to get the message out there about what we're doing. So appreciate, you allowing us to do that today.
Well, I will say to everyone, all the caregivers or the families or the nurses that listen to this interview, please go to the website, fredfootsteps.org. That's fredsfootsteps.org, and you will find a lot of the information you need to understand the great projects, the great programs, the great work, the assistance, and also if you can support financially, we always encourage people to donate to organizations like yours, Christine. Thank you so much for being here with us. Before we close today's episode, I want to talk to you about a book that was very important to my family. The book is called Cancer Party by Sarah Olsher. Now, this book was the one I used when my son, who at the time was 4 years old, was diagnosed with cancer and we had to start treatment. When that happened, I really had a hard time talking to him about it. I looked for a lot of books, and Cancer Party was the one who I felt it was the best way to talk to a 4-year-old. It's very visual, it's very simple, but very effective in telling a story. Essentially, what Cancer Party tells us is that the body has yellow cells, and then suddenly cancer cells, blue cells, appear in the body and start multiplying, creating a party. But this party can get so loud, big, and even build some structures that will make yellow cells and the rest of the body very sad and sick. This was very effective at the moment, but still effective 3 years later. For example, when we had a relapse last year, I told my child that the blue cells are back and we had to start chemo, kick the blue cells away. But when we have clear scans, we can say, we took pictures and no blue cells in your body. So again, after years, Cancer Party by Sarah Olsher has been an incredible resource for my family. I highly recommend using it. We're going to talk about other books and other resources in other episodes. Thank you so much for spending time with us at the Broken Not Broke interview. I hope this podcast helped you to get some clarity in these very difficult moments. We know that you're going through a rough time. I was there too. But this resource is helpful to know that there is many organizations that can help you in this journey. Please visit us at brokenNotbroke.org or follow us in our YouTube channel for more episodes of the Broken Not Broke interview. You can also follow us in the socials. We have a page at Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we're going to be posting a lot of parts of this video as well in these platforms. A special thanks to our producer, Vanessa Toro, and thank you to you for spending time with us today. I'm Adrian Franco, your host, Broken Not Broker interview, and wishing you a lot of strength and hope in 2026.